Díomh agus fáilte arás. I hope everybody enjoyed that, the world premiere of Foscadh. Fantastic new Irish film, fantastic new Irish language feature film, and a first feature film at that from director Sean Brannock. I'm now fortunate to be joined by Sean himself, as well as the cast, Donal O'Haley, Fionnuala Flaherty, and Cillian O'Garvey. Lads, thanks a million for joining me to chat about the film.
Thanks.
Good hours there. Scotland and Scott. I suppose if we just dive right into it, and let's go back to the beginning. Sean, we were actually just chatting just now, and you were telling me it's been 4 years actually in the pipeline, this film.
Yeah, Paddy Hayes, my producer, I think approached me about 4 years ago with Donal Ryan's novel, The Thing About December, and thought that it might be an interesting project to bring on and to write a script for it. So that was about 4 years ago. I remember distinctly, it was a Friday that he handed me the novel, and I think I read it in one sitting. It took me about 6 hours or thereabouts, and thought, this is amazing, and wrote about 15 drafts altogether.
Wow.
Inspired by the characters in the film, and between that, the rest of the cast workshopped it with me as well. The filming of it, the editing of it, a couple of lockdowns in between. So yeah, it took about 4 years to get to the screen.
Fair play. It's quite a journey. It's funny actually that Paddy approached you with the material because I know you're a Connemara man, and I know Donal Ryan's work myself. I think he's one of the quintessential writers of the Irish rural experience, modern writers certainly. So I'm guessing that you recognised a lot of your experience in the material.
Very much so, and I had shot a short called Solitude, which had similar themes, I guess, except it was from the perspective of someone a lot older than our main character, John. So Paddy just saw a fit there, I think, and suggested that I take a look at this source material. And yes, certainly similarities. I could totally recognise the main character. I thought he was riveting, actually, and it's such an internal story as well. And we could see that it would be a challenge maybe to adapt that to the screen, and we went our own way in many ways, but we stuck to those brilliant characters and the world that Donal Ryan created. But yeah, I think it's a story that I see replicated all over Connemara, certainly, and I imagine it's all over rural Ireland, really. These people who, through circumstance, frequently through the death of their parents, the generation that came before them, are left on their own and almost helpless. And because of this over-cosseting that they've had and this inability to forge their own independent path, they're just basically marooned. So I think it's a compelling story. But, it's certainly thanks to Donal Ryan and the brilliant novels that we were able to come down this route.
Absolutely. Donal, maybe we could talk about, because staying on the characters and what Sean was talking about, was it difficult, or maybe tell us about some of the conversations that you and Sean had about bringing to life a character who's very much, he's in his own inner world, he's an introverted person, and was it difficult to emote that, I suppose?
Yeah, well, I guess just kind of following on what Sean said there, we had a very kind of, I guess, creatively kind of fertile foundation to start with John Cunliffe, Donal Ryan's character. And really the conversations we had were, okay, well, how can we take these individuals, these fully fledged characters, and adapt them to screen and do that in a way that's honest and truthful. And I think they were kind of the two pillars on which we built the world from, or John certainly, trying to portray kind of honestly this character that is so unique and different from that of kind of your traditional, if you will, Connemara man, someone who kind of finds himself in a world that he's ill-equipped to deal with, who sees the world differently, who has his own perspective on things, who's incredibly innocent and is now kind of forced to defend for himself. And so I think they were kind of the most important things, Will, for us, was how do we tell this honestly? Because there was so much in the book. But in saying that, I think really Sean did an amazing job at taking what was there and really bringing it into the cinematic world that we have, you know, and hopefully making it into a compelling story.
Yeah, no, I think you guys did an amazing job. And the universal truth of it, I think, is just instantly recognizable, especially when you're from rural Ireland. But you hit on something interesting there, Donald, that I wanted to ask Sean about, which is because you talked about adapting it cinematically, and I wonder, was it hard to balance, Sean, the visual language of an introverted character with telling a story cinematically, you know, for a big screen experience? There's, you know, we see these beautiful wide landscape shots of the Connemara Mountains, but then that's also balanced with a lot of the drama happens in these, you know, otherwise unremarkable kind of interior spaces.
Yeah, it was certainly a challenge, and I think, yeah, you know, the approach that we had, like, I mean, it was quite organic. You know, it seemed to me that the best approach was to try and understand the world, create the world for all of the characters, but particularly for John Cunliffe, Donald's character, and to imagine, you know, different snapshots and what we'd show to give an overview of what his life's like, what he wants, what's weighing down on him, what he wants to achieve, and all of that. But yeah, a huge challenge, because Donald Ryan's brilliant novel is really told from the perspective of John, who is an introvert, who is by himself for, you know, large parts of the story. But that said, I figured that if we could put John Cunliffe, the character, into interesting situations, and if we directed the lens on him, observed him reacting to the newness of the world, stuff that might be quite, you know, regular to you and me or to anyone else, such as going to the shop, such as starting his day's work, that, you know, we'd hit on some interesting scenes and bring to life the character. A good example is when he sings. You know, that wasn't scripted. There's a scene where he just starts singing outside. But I remember speaking with Donald maybe the night beforehand, and it looked like we might have a little bit more time at that location. And I remember saying to Donald, "Must mean I wonder, does he sing to himself?" Because, you know, he doesn't really interact with anyone. And Donald, being in character, and it was brilliant because he could have these conversations with John, the character, more or less, said, "Yeah, I reckon we'd do that." And lo and behold, we had half an hour, 40 minutes at the end of the shooting day, and we shot that little piece, which I think is lovely and beautiful and adds so much to the film. So quite organic, but I think if you knew the world, and all the characters and the actors knew the world, you could steer an interesting path.
Yeah, and I suppose that's the beauty of having a cast that comes from the area as well, and that recognizes the kind of the characters that you're working with. Fionnuala, I wanted to ask you about adapting the character of Siobhan from the book, because to me she was one of the most interesting characters in that I feel like every other character's motivation is defined quite clearly in relation to John. Siobhan you're a little more uncertain about. She certainly kind of treats John, I think, the most equal of all of the other cast of characters. But is that just that she's better at playing her cards close to her chest? What did you find Siobhan's motivation to be?
Yeah, I think so. We had a lot of discussion about this, as the lads were saying. I'm not sure if it was even, I don't think if we even came to a conclusion as what her motives are. I don't even know if she knows herself, which is what's quite beautiful about the story and ultimately life. Sometimes we don't know why we're doing the things we do. Yeah, I think it's definitely, it was quite confusing approaching it, but it was beautifully messy, if I can put it like that. We had a lot of chats, and I suppose as a woman as well, sometimes, yeah, it was. I'm not quite sure if we know what her motives were, but I hope it came across that there was times that she softened a lot, and then her insecurities and her worry kind of brought the armor back up again. So I hope that it comes across as organic and as real. as it felt.
Well, I mean, it's so interesting that, I mean, it is to the audience. I think it's more interesting to be left a bit ambiguous. But certainly, I mean, I'm thinking of that great scene on the mountainside of the fire between herself and John, and it's like, you know, whether, even if we assume that she's a bad faith actor, she still does a lot of the emotional labor with him, and that's still honest and true regardless, you know.
Absolutely, yeah. That was actually the last day that I was filming. It was a cold day, but it was magical. But yeah, that's such a gorgeous scene, and I think we really see her vulnerability come through there. And I think she realizes that she's probably crossed a line where she could potentially really hurt him, and a massive amount of damage, if not already had been caused, that she could cause more at that stage. But yeah, it's interesting, lovely scenes.
And Cillian, one of the first things I said to Paddy actually when he showed me this film was I thought there was a lot going on about masculinity in this, and you know, Irish masculinity in particular, and it seems that, you know, John in a way is kind of defined by his, you know, this arrested development, but he doesn't know it, whereas I suppose the character of Dave really has a chip on his shoulder, it seems to me like.
Yeah, that's something I think that was present in the character of Dave, where I feel he was somebody who maybe as a man missed out on, or whether he missed out on it or whether society doesn't provide for it anymore, the kind of stages or rituals in life that you might ordinarily go through, we'll say up until 20 years ago, where there was more things were structured and there was like a path laid out for you. And while that obviously has its limitations and it's within certain parameters, when you burst open society, then I think for masculinity in particular, there's a question of, well, what am I supposed to do now? How should I act now? And I always felt that he perhaps fell prey to the message of, you know, have a good time, drink, that these were the things that were sold to him, let's say in his early 20s, for example, that kind of got a grip on him. And yet there's some part of him that deep down inside of himself knows that there's more to life than this. And he's, I think in his relationship with John, he finds some, or at least whether he finds it or not, he's certainly seeking connection, seeking meaning, seeking something that, you know, that probably in general, I hate to use any kind of buzzwords around this masculinity question or anything like that, but there is some kind of meaning perhaps missing from many men's lives, and I think that can be particularly true for men from rural areas where society has changed so rapidly, and I feel he falls within that category.
Yeah. And the modernization, because you touched on it, is actually a huge part of the film as well, you know, when we see the wind farm creeping in and everything. And again, just going back to motivation, like I wondered, Donal, what did you think about John's motivation? I mean, again, everyone else's motives are quite defined in relation to John, but John himself, again, he's so sort of enclosed. Like, did you talk about what John wants out of life? You know, he makes allusions to possibly, you know, going off to England and stuff, but it seems like he doesn't even know why he's suggesting that. He just feels like maybe he should.
Yeah. I think really, well, I think that's the kind of as the film unfolds, that's what we're witnessing, I think, is John trying to figure out, you know, what it is to be alive in the place that he is, you know, what it is to be a man, what it is to be an adult. You know, as to his own motivations, I think that the friendships and certainly the relationship with Siobhan, Fionnuala's character, are life-changing for him, you know, and with Dave as well. I think he's someone who has, you know, because of the upbringing that he had, which was quite kind of sheltered, he didn't kind of experience that intimacy, that close kind of human relationship, and so it's all new to him. And I think certainly with Sean, that was something that we continually talked about while we were shooting. Was, you know, this is the first time that this thing is happening to John. This is the first time he's had a friend like Dave. This is the first time he's you know, spent an evening with someone like Siobhan, you know. So it's kind of, it's all new, and therefore it's being kind of processed in real time. And I guess, well, just to speak of Sean's process as well, because really I think the film is sings in the way, or the film worked out the way it did because of Sean's openness with workshops and rehearsals and the constant kind of distilling of script and character. And you know, certainly from my point of view, it was a very rewarding way to work. Having that opportunity, as opposed to just going on set and kind of figuring out on the spot, you know, having the chance to really kind of workshop something until everyone was in a, you know, a relatively good place with it, was a great way to work.
That sounds great. Sean, maybe you could actually tell us a bit more about that, and maybe as well talk a bit, obviously we can't have everyone on a Zoom call, or it gets a bit sort of, you know, having people waiting in their little windows. But if you want to talk about working with some of the, you have other great cast members like Dimmer Tafuicha, you worked with the fantastic Colm Hogan in cinematography. If there's any particular shout outs you want to make.
Sure, yeah, loads. There's Marigold production design, Colin LeClaire, Colin LeClaire with editing, Paul Rowland with the sound design, Sindri Mara Sigurdsson for the music, loads. I mean, everybody added something, and I'm a great believer, I'm process driven actually, but also a great believer in having an organic way of working. So logically, to me, if you have all of the elements there in the script, irrespective of how you distill it or talk about it or whatever slight diversion you take, generally you'll still have that core coming through. What I believe the performances will be much better if the actors have some form of ownership on it, and I think that's true of the music. I think that's true of the cinematography. I think it's true of all parts. And to the best of my ability, I think I took that philosophy into all forms of the production and the pre-production and the post-production. And what we have is what we have. In terms of working with the actors, you know, up to even shooting the takes, you know, anything could go to a point. You know, we could come up with a new line of dialogue or a new way of reacting or acting, and that. What we tended to do, though, I hope the rest of the cast agree with me, was if we could take a line of dialogue out and express the sentiment some other way, we tended to favor that. And I think that also happened in the edit, you know. Scene where, I'll give an example of this. There's a scene where Dave and John are in the house and Siobhan's arriving outside in her new car. And Dave is, you know, doesn't think much of the car she's bought. And once she comes in, he gives her a line about, you know, calling the hairdryer and that. And I think originally Siobhan had a line of dialogue as a retort. But when it came to it, Fionnuala just did this brilliant thing where she just, you know, frustration, just took this heavy breath, and we cut on that, you know, rather than hanging around and waiting for the line to tell you what you already knew. You know?
Yeah.
So I think we did that throughout the film, and I think it serves as well. And I would say that approach, less being more, going for the subtleties if you could, throughout the film, whether it was through the edit, through fantastic photography, whatever it might be, that's what my aesthetic would be, I guess, favoring that rather than hammering something home.
Yeah. And did you guys have to, I mean, I know this 4-year timeline came right up against COVID. You're releasing the film while we're still, the pandemic is still ongoing. And I imagine you did much of the post-production during lockdown. Did any of the shoot cross over with that period of time?
Yeah, we had completed our shoot on Christmas 2019, but we kept a few days back for, you know, to have a first cut of the film to see if there was anything that needed to be redone or improved on and all of that, which, you know, was tallied well with the direction I wanted to take things. So fair play to Paddy who organised that. So if you remember, we had the first lockdown, but there was a period of time in May, June, I think, when production companies were allowed to go shooting again. So we had another 2 days then So some of the scenes, such as John recounting the place names in the mountains, were shot during that period. We had a cut of the film at that stage, and the gaps and things that I'd like to fill, and we were able to do that, as well as shoot some alternative angles and certain technical aspects. So we got a bit of that done then, and then of course another lockdown came on, and we were dealing with our post-production up to November of that year.
Yeah, fair play to all of you for rolling with the punches. And just by way of wrapping up, because we're almost at time, I just wanted to ask, as you know, creative people, all of you, so what has lockdown been like, and have you managed to kind of harness that time at all in terms of the projects that you've got on the go? I know in particular, Foscadh was a terrific hit of lockdown here in Galway. Maybe if we go around to start with Sean, maybe with yourself. I mean, I imagine Foscadh is what took up your time.
Very much so. It's very strange. It's my first feature film anyway, so you're kind of in this strange space where you don't know what to expect, and you're trying to package and put together the best of your work as much as you can. But of course, the world has stopped and that. But I'm also writing at the same time. I'm writing some of the Donal actually, and using the time to, you know, hopefully get another project off the ground, or to at least write something, and to give it the time to properly, you know, develop and percolate. You know, so that's what I'm doing. Yeah. I can't really compare it to anything else because I haven't been in this position.
Cillian, how about yourself? Have you found the last year plus?
I don't know. Is the honest answer. Creatively, it was good in one sense because I ended up shooting something like, when was that, about maybe 11 months ago, in the middle of all the madness. There was a History Channel production where I played Walter Chrysler, so that was surreal to take on something like that in the middle of an already very surreal situation. And other than that, I think I've been just learning that as a creative person, that you don't have to confine it, you know, just to your job, let's say, because too often I feel people who are creative feel that they need to limit themselves and say, well, I'm an actor, or I'm a musician, or I'm whatever. Whereas I feel if you're a creative type, then every single second of the day can be engaged with in a creative fashion. So I've done my best to do that during the last year or so, but sometimes with greater success than other days.
Yeah, we all know what that's like. Fair play.
Yes, yeah.
How about yourself?
Yeah, well, Foscadh was definitely a wonderful call to get. Last year, something I wasn't expecting. It was a drive-in drama with the great company Phoebe. So yeah, that was wonderful, and it did quite well. But other than that, I've been out in Inishmore for most of the lockdowns, and I suppose, as Cillian was saying, it kind of gives you an opportunity to slow down and to be inspired by the nature and home again, because usually it's just a flyby visit. So yeah,
that's great.
That was my experience.
Yeah.
Nice.
Donal, final word to you.
Just kind of really what everyone has said. A difficult kind of 16 months. It's nice to reflect, but then you get to the stage where, you know, you want to kind of get out and get back to life again. So I'm delighted to be where we are now, where we're kind of finally emerging from it. Working on a few projects, one with Sean and another one with Tom Sullivan, the director of Aracht, and auditioning away all the time.
Great, that sounds fantastic. Sean, I'm actually going to give final word to you, just as by way of a parting shot question. One of the other things I liked so much about Foscadh is it seems to me more than most an Irish film that I can see the influence, at least, of other Irish films on it. You know, I think some of the sort of realism of the rural Irish experience kind of reminds me in some ways of like early films of Joe Comerford, and you know, the contextualization of Irish language in cinema. I see influences of Bob Quinn and stuff as well, and then even more contemporary stuff like Garage and you know, are those films, would those be touchstones for you? Is that just coincidence? Am I reading into it?
Oh, that's a really good question, and I'm well aware of Lenny Abraham's work and Joe Comerford's work, and especially Bob Quinn, who lives not too far from me, and I've interviewed him for some research that I did a couple of years ago. So yeah, definitely they have to be. I'd say, if I'm honest though, I mean, the biggest influence would be the likes of Lynn Ramsey, some of the European masters like Tarkovsky and Bergman, and a lot of cinematographers actually. I'm deeply influenced by that. But if there's an Irish piece of work that really influenced me, it's probably Patrick Kavanagh. He has this brilliant poem called Epic, which is, I guess, about these huge important conflicts that people can have, but that don't really cause a stir outside of their own lives, you know. And you know, there's this brilliant line that it has: "Gods make their own importance," and I think that was the biggest Irish touchstone for me.
Great.
Taken.
Well, thanks again. Thanks again to all of you. And I can't wait for audiences to discover this film as it continues to go from here out into the world. And yeah, we'll hopefully do this all again in front of a live audience again in the near future. Thanks very much, guys.
Thank you.
Slán.
Thank you.
Slán.